Good evening to you all. Good afternoon. Happy Saturday to you. Welcome to Carrow Road, where they have been busy mowing the grass. Oh, although I think they have stopped now. So I'm sat in the snake pit, which is lovely. Obviously, need to sit down from all the hilarity of today's game, and so I'm not standing up. Not at all. Finished 1-1 here with West Bromwich Albion. I think I've got a chance of doing this under 10 minutes, this video, which is always my aim, but I think I might pull it off after today. Curious game, curious afternoon, for lots of reasons, which I will no doubt go into. But essentially, Norwich were pretty awful for the most part, I would say, and that's not unfair because that's what Dean Smith has said. The players themselves know they weren't very good today, and the supporters kind of in a minority either grumbled or booed during the course of the afternoon, or certainly at half-time and full-time. And there was a lot of frustration at other things as well. So it certainly wasn't solely delivered at Norwich's players and performance. But I think essentially what I'm saying is everyone knows it was a bit rank today, which is fine. And again, I think that probably owed a lot to the opposition, which I will speak about in a bit as well, because it does take two on the pitch. But I think probably a bit of context here. You know, Norwich are 7 games unbeaten. On the basis of that West Bromwich Albion performance, they're not going to play many better sides this year. And I know that's going to sound strange because of the table, but they're not. They're not. So to scrape to a draw by fair means or foul is something to be applauded at this point. Oh no, they are still mowing the grass. Wonderful. There we go. Obviously, there's no game taking place here or in the Championship for 2 weeks now due to the international break. So there'll be a bit of a hiatus for a moment before a very busy October comes into view. So there we go. But yeah, in terms of the game, Norwich were behind after 9 minutes. O'Shea with a completely free header from a free kick, which looked horrendous defensively. It will look awful. I think everyone agrees it was awful. In the end, it was quite astute blocking from West Brom, which, as I asked Steve Bruce after the game today, is something they work on. It's something all teams work on, obviously. But you know, the fact that O'Shea was free was not because no one hadn't noticed. No one hadn't noticed. No one had noticed he was there. It wasn't that he just appeared from nowhere. They knew he was there, but the blocking runs meant that Sam Byram, and then a bit of lack of communication, no one could get out to meet him. The result is quite hilarious because O'Shea is basically allowed to wander into the penalty area at the back post and head home John Swift's free kick. So I think it's a shocking goal to concede, but it is explainable. It's the way it happened. Norwich have got to make sure that it doesn't happen again, because it was a really soft goal on their part. But West Brom could be happy that the work they went into the blocking runs and all that sort of stuff did pay off. It wasn't necessarily a howler without any influence from the opposition. Now, I have to say, going into this game today, I kind of, gone 60 minutes or whatever, was getting exactly what I expected, because you only have to look at West Brom, look at how they play. They're not as bad as the table suggests they are. They've drawn a lot of games and lost as many as Norwich. They have a pretty good scoring record, but have conceded some pretty sloppy goals. And from all of the noises before today's game, and I did a BBC podcast, which Jed Wallace was on, and heard him say this himself, they did not want to concede a goal here. They wanted to come here, keep a clean sheet, and then hope that they could come away with something. So you already had the fact that they knew that they had to be defensively secure, that they would have to play at their very best, because everyone kind of appreciates that Norwich is a very tough place to come to. They would have to be at the very top of their game. They would have to play it hard, and the manager was under pressure. So everyone was focused. And if they avoided Norwich getting an early goal, then they could sort of dig in and see where they went. And it became as awkward as most games with West Brom have been here in recent years. But it went to plan. West Brom got the goal, which, as I said, was fairly hideous, but it gave them a perfect dynamic in the game. It meant they could take their time, which they really, really, really did as often as possible. Take their time, lots of time, use it up. But they also had a really good tight mid block where they sort of slipped back into a 4-4-2, and in the middle of the pitch when Norwich were trying to build up from the back. And then at times they also got quite deep, but they did it on the edge of their area. And essentially Norwich kind of ended up playing across it most of the time. They found it incredibly difficult to work their way through. I think the only time they really did it was when Dow picked up a lovely pass and popped Sam Byram in, and he took a good touch but couldn't control it. But that was sort of how Norwich had to work it, and they just never moved the ball quick enough at any point over the course of this game. So again, a bit like the Bristol City game, you have an opposition who are good. Having seen that today, they absolutely should still be finishing somewhere near the top 6 this season. And if they're in touching distance, as Steve Bruce said himself, actually, if they're in touching distance with the top 10 before the World Cup, they can quite easily kick on and finish near the top 6 by the end of the season. And I agree. I mean, I can only assume West Brom have not played like that all season, because from all the teams I've seen Norwich play this year, that performance from West Brom would have beaten all of them, I think, pretty much. So, and there's a bit of a dynamic where you could say that West Brom played on the counter, but they did still have their periods of on the ball, and they just probably need to be a bit tighter. But I genuinely see them as top 6 contenders, absolutely, because they probably are the best. They were better than Bristol City because they had a much better balance to them, and on the balance of play, they probably should have won because they created far better chances. Even though Tim Krul didn't really have any saves of note to make, I would say most of their chances, their finishing was off target, which is probably the bigger issue, but they did create some really good opportunities. For Norwich, Gabriel Sara probably came closest apart from the goal with a shot from a ridiculous angle. It was an incredible effort and a great run forward, and that is what he's very good at. But I thought on his first league start, the game looked a bit too much for him at times physically, and that's a bit of a worry. This was a big game for him to get thrown into. West Brom were a very good side, but he is a £9 million player, and he's come in with high hopes, and it wouldn't just be about the Championship for him, I'm sure. So can't really look at that. And at this point now, he's been training with his teammates for a while. We do obviously have the comparison of Marcelino Nunez. He's obviously someone who's going to need a little bit of time to acclimatise. He's obviously someone who has got something about him, but you're going to need the other elements of your game to make it work in terms of the rest of your performance. So we might have to see how he gets on, and then maybe reserve judgment come the other side of when we get into next year, when he'll have had plenty, a good few months to acclimatise, and hopefully there'll be signs of him being better paced. But it's difficult because he's going to struggle to get up to pace if he's not physically playing. I'm rabbiting on, aren't I? So I've been through the goal. West Brom possibly should have had a penalty. Grant Hanley with contact on John Swift in the box. Now John Swift is taking the ball away from goal. Steve Bruce is adamant it was a penalty. The referee decided not to give it. For me, if you take it to a VAR line of thought, I don't think the referee overturns it either way, or VAR overturns it either way. So the referee gives it, I don't think VAR overturns it. If he doesn't give it, I don't think VAR probably overturns it. I think it leaves the decision to him. And my issue is, yes, there was contact, but I think John Swift is trying to buy it. And at that point, with where he's going, Grant Hanley doesn't need to push him over. There's no challenge there at that point. So I don't view the contact as instigating him going over. I view Swift instigating the contact so he can go over. So it would have been soft to have been given, but I do also understand completely if it had been given. And I know everyone who probably is not any West Brom fans will be like, it was a clear penalty. I just thought it was a bit soft. It could have been given either way. And Norwich probably, were lucky that it went in their favour on this occasion. And then you have the equaliser. I said Norwich were really toiling, and there weren't many chances. And West Brom did defend very well, and also had the greater threat throughout the match, I thought. But the goal comes from a set play. Teemu Pukki hits a great shot on target. The ball then hits Sam Byram, who isn't offside, I believe is a consensus, although I haven't seen that clearly from a replay. The question is whether it hits his arm. West Brom are adamant that it does. The replays are so quick you can't really tell. The assistant referee wasn't really sure what happened because he had the conversation with the referee, and you could clearly see him going, I don't know, I've not got a clue, which I guess was, did it hit his arm? Did it go in off his arm? And the linesman can't pick that out. The referee needs to be able to see that. And because he quite clearly wasn't offside once they had that chat. Sam Byram was diplomatic, said that he didn't know. It hit sort of either his chest or his arm, not sure which, probably both, not sure which first. Because I guess there is an argument. I don't know. The question for me is, I don't know if it hits your chest and then your arm and goes in. Is that still considered handball? Because if it is, which I suspect it might be for goals scored, maybe it should have still been disallowed. So again, Norwich got probably a bit of luck here in getting this point, and maybe that's the luck that they didn't get, say, when they drew here with Wigan and didn't get that penalty and late on in that game. So, you know, probably a bit more than Norwich deserved. But, you know, it's a really good point for me on a performance when they were pretty poor. Everyone knows they were poor, and I don't think it required the level of angst that there was. At the moment, inside Carrow Road, if I'm honest, it feels a bit entitled. It feels a bit like, yeah, we're really good in the Championship. Why are we not winning this game? Why are we here and not winning a game in the Championship? And, you know, that performance today, if it had happened in 2018-19, the supporters probably would have been like, come on, get behind it. Come on, you yellows, on the ball, City. Some support, some shouting. Whereas today, the atmosphere was, this is rubbish. What are you doing? Boo, Dino, sort it out. And that's a really interesting dynamic. I don't think it's necessarily... I think there's lots of reasons for that. I'm certainly not throwing out accusations. I'm just describing how it was and why it was like that. And, you know, everyone expects this team to go up. They sort of demand it, really. And that's part of the expectation around watching this Norwich team. And there were elements when the team started to try and click, because they were struggling and they weren't able to instigate anything themselves. When they started to try and click, you know, there was a bit of support for them then. So as so often, it kind of needs the players to instigate it. But yeah, in a big game today, but it wasn't really going Norwich's way. That was an interesting dynamic. And I think as the season goes on, that might need to change. But how that changes is an interesting question. One I have lots of views on that I'll save for another video. Grant Hanley did start today. Wasn't expecting him to. He was clearly feeling his shoulder by the end of the game. I'm not convinced he's going to go away with Scotland. I'm also not convinced that it's just going to have 2 weeks of rest and then disappear as a problem, because, you know, each time there's contact on that shoulder, it's going to be an issue. And it's a nasty joint, the shoulder. So I'm going to have to keep... Well, I don't get employed to, but, you know, we'll keep an eye on that and see how it goes. There were some scratchy performances today. No one really played very well, if I'm honest. And I thought, you know, the fullbacks struggled. I thought Diangara gave Max Aarons a pretty difficult afternoon. And although Dean Smith wanted the fullbacks to play higher, as soon as they did, they just left gaps that West Brom kind of knew they could exploit. So that's, again, why I think you have to give West Brom a lot of credit for the way that they reduced Norwich in spaces and made it incredibly difficult. They played really well. It'll be very interesting to see if they then go and lose, you know, at home to someone like Rotherham. I love Rotherham, but they're always the example, aren't they? But, you know, it'll be interesting how their season progresses between now and the next time Norwich play them, because they should be capable of much more. So, yeah, there we go. Hope that's all fair and considered. 2 weeks off now with the international break. So I will not do one of these for a while, obviously. I think it's Blackpool away when we come back. October is mental and there's lots of away games. So keep an eye out for those. We are still planning to do an On The Ball podcast on Monday evening. I appreciate Monday is a bank holiday. And of course, Her Majesty, the late Queen's funeral. So we'll try and get the mood right. But I think it'd be nice to do a podcast at the end of that day as usual. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, there'll be plenty of stuff over at The Athletic. So keep an eye on that, where you can also read from last week, my piece on Teemu Pukki and my piece on Mark Attanasio, and lots of other pieces from my colleagues who are wonderful. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care of yourselves. And just a final word. It was lovely that we had such a wonderfully received minute's silence in memory of former Norwich City chairman Roger Mumby, who died the other day. It was confirmed by the club today. So thoughts are, of course, with Roger's friends and family. He was a lovely man. I always enjoyed speaking to him. And yeah, may he rest in peace. Have a lovely evening. Take care of yourselves. And see you all very soon. Bye-bye. I'm not ready for the grand depart. I've said the grand depart and I'm not ready for it. I'm ready now. Au revoir.